Good morning, welcome. This is Andy Booth from Governance Services. Under agenda item number 1, Councillor Ben Garner was appointed as chair prior to the meeting. Can I just ask members present to confirm that they're happy with this? Right, nods there from Councillor Marshall and Councillor Buckley. Thank you. Can I pass over to you, please, Chair?
Thanks, Andy. Morning, everyone, and welcome to this remote hearing of the Licensing Subcommittee. My name is Councillor Ben Garner, and I'll be chairing today's hearing, as you've just heard. Before we proceed further, could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being streamed live, again, as Andy's just pointed out, on Leeds City Council YouTube channel. Could I ask Councillors Buckley and Marshall Catton just to introduce yourselves, please?
Yes, morning, Chair. Councillor Neil Buckley. I represent Old Woodley Ward.
Good morning, Chair, and morning, everyone. Councillor Abigail Marshall Cutting is my name, representing Little London Woodhouse and the City Centre.
Thank you. And just to confirm that although remote, this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee meets the requirements of the Council's Constitution. While the items today will be fully discussed as usual, in the meeting and on the stream itself, remote attendance requires a few slight changes to how we manage the debate. A few of you have been through this a few times before, but just as a reminder, can all attendees mute their microphones unless I invite them to speak, just to stop any background noise. Keep cameras on if possible during the hearing, and everyone will be invited to introduce themselves at the start of the hearing, just to make it clear to public observers and to each other who will be involved in proceedings. So just ask for your assistance and patience as per usual. Could I invite officers to introduce themselves, please, and mute your microphones once you've introduced yourselves. I'll start with Rob Brown.
Good morning. Sorry, I'm trying to unmute there. My name is Robert Brown. I'm a solicitor in Leeds City Council's Legal Services, and I'm the legal advisor to the subcommittee this morning.
And Matthew Nelson.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew, part of Entertainment Licensing, and today I'm supported by Samantha Longfellow Pennicott and Nawazish Khan. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Morning, Andy Booth from Governance Services, and I'll be the clerk to the subcommittee this morning.
That's great, thank you. I think that's it in terms of officers supporting, so thank you very much. Could I ask the applicant and representative just to introduce yourselves, please? We've got Mr. Semper and Mr. Dodson.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Semper. I'm from the licensing guys, and we're representing Mr. Dodson this morning.
And Mr. Dodson, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, just so everyone's aware who you are on the stream?
Hi there, good morning everyone. I'm Mr. David Dodson and I'm the owner of No Problem Convenience Store.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. And we've got the objectors to the application. So just going through, we've got Mr. Mudge.
I'm Pete Mudge. I work on rejuvenating Armley Town Centre.
And you have a couple of witnesses, don't you? We've got Jonathan Hindley and John McKimmins. If you could just introduce yourself.
Jonathan Hindley and Jonathan McKimmins.
Hello, my name's John Hindley. I'm a public health officer for the West. I'm part of the locality and primary care team, Public Health, Leeds City Council.
And John McKimmins, just a quick introduction.
We don't appear to have Mr. McKimmins on the call at the moment, Chair.
Was he? No, I'm sure I saw it. No, that's fine. I'll watch out for him just in case, and I'm sure Peter, you'll let us know. And finally, then we've got Councillor James McKenna. Jim, just a quick introduction, if you could.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. I'm Councillor Jim McKenna. I am an Army councillor.
Thank you.
Used to be with the Inclusion Project at Park.
Thanks, everyone. Could I ask the clerk to go through agenda items 2 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right, under agenda item number 2, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item number 3, we've got no exempt information on the agenda today. Agenda item number 4. There are no late items, but there has been some supplementary information sent, which has included antisocial behaviour and crime data, and also 2 statements of truth. These have been sent to all parties and published on the Council's website alongside the agenda. And under agenda item number 5, could I ask members if they've got any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare?
No.
No. Okay, back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. So agenda item number 6, the main item today is the application for the grant of a premises licence for No Problem Off licence and convenience store 41 Armley Ridge Road. Could the legal advisors to the subcommittee outline the procedure for the hearing, please, Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Our usual procedure for this type of application is that the applicant addresses the committee first, and then any other parties who have indicated an intention to speak at the hearing would then address the committee, and then the applicant has the chance to respond to anything said by those other parties. I suggest that the representation is dealt with in the following order. Mr. Mudge to go first because he has at least one witness, I understand, and then followed by Councillor McKenna. Are you happy with that, Chair?
That sounds okay if everyone's happy, unless people have places to go. But we do ask if you can stay, if possible. But that seems fine with me.
Thank you. In making its determination, the subcommittee will consider what is appropriate and proportionate to promote the licensing objectives, namely 1, the prevention of crime and disorder, 2, public safety, 3, the prevention of public nuisance, and 4, the protection of children from harm. The regulations permit the subcommittee to set a time limit on presentations, providing the same time limit is applied to all parties. The usual time limit applied is 15 minutes per party, and the applicant may wish to split their allocation between their initial presentation and their response to the other parties, for example, 10 minutes initially and 5 minutes at the end. Can I ask first the applicant's representative, Mr. Semper, do you feel that 15 minutes would be sufficient for you to make your presentation?
Yeah, that's a really good point, that is, and thank you for the opportunity to ask. What I'd like to do is introduce. I got timed out last time because I used up most of my time at the beginning, and then we listened to over an hour, maybe an hour and a half of objections, and then I was left with 5 minutes to answer them. So what I'd like to do is just introduce the application to you and the applicant, and explain the outline of what we're trying to do, and then save the majority of my presentation to the summary, whereby I can address the individual representations or the subject matter of the representation. So I'm thinking 20 minutes, 5 to kick off, 15 at the other end, if that's okay, sir.
And can I just check with Mr. Mudge, do you feel that 15 minutes or 20 minutes would be sufficient for you?
Well, I do have 1 and possibly 2 people speaking, so potentially 20 might be better. I'd be delighted for the applicant to have 20 minutes, certainly. No objections at all.
Okay. Councillor McKenna?
I'm on mute and oh, sorry about that. I'll only require 5 minutes, I think, to make my points.
Okay, thank you. Chair and members, it's up to you to decide whether or not to allow more than the usual 15 minutes. But can I ask you to consider that? If you want to go into private session, you may do so. But otherwise, are you happy with 20 minutes per party?
If the applicant wishes 20 minutes, I'm more than happy to support him. I think it's important he has the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. In the circumstances, we haven't got quite the number of objections last time, as Mr. Semper mentioned. So I think that'd be fine. Neil and Abigail, are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In that case, a time limit of 20 minutes per party will apply. After each presentation, the subcommittee members may wish to ask questions, and the time for questions to be asked and answered is in addition to the time limit set for presentations. Please note we do not permit cross-examination in subcommittee. If any party feels there is a crucial question that needs to be asked and answered, please do not ask the person directly, but instead make a request to the chair, who will then determine whether or not the question should be put. Parties may request permission to call witnesses, and in this case, I note that both Mr. Mudge and Mr. Semper intend, I think, to call witnesses. Are there any other additional witnesses that which any party wishes to call today? All documents that have previously been submitted have been copied and circulated to this subcommittee in advance. You should have the same original packs consisting of a main bundle numbered to 58 and a supplementary pack consisting of 26 pages. If anybody doesn't have those packs, then could you let me know? Okay. It would be helpful when referring to documents to identify which document you're referring to by its bundle page number. Additional documents may now only be tabled with the consent of all the parties. Does anybody have any additional documents which they would like to refer to today which aren't already included in the bundles? No. Okay. Please note your presentation is your only opportunity to address the subcommittee. So you need to make sure you've included in your presentation everything that you wish to say and to have taken into account. After the parties have made their presentations and after any questions, the subcommittee members will go into a private session. If members have any additional questions to ask, they will return to the main meeting to ask those questions before returning back to the private session to make their decision. Can all parties please remain in the meeting until they are asked to leave? All parties will be informed once the hearing has ended and will be advised of the decision in writing within 5 working days of today. Can I ask if there are any questions about the procedure we propose to follow before we start? Yeah. No? Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Could I ask the licensing officer to present the application, please, Matthew?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Chair. So this morning, members are asked to consider an application for the grant of a premises licence for No Problem Convenience Store, 41 Armley Ridge Road, Armley, Leeds, LS12. The application explains that the premises will operate as a mini market and grocery store. Mr. David Dodson is both the applicant and the proposed designated premises supervisor. And in summary, the application is for the sale by retail of alcohol for consumption off the premises, Monday to Sunday from 6 AM until 11 PM. A copy of the application form outlining the proposed operating schedule, including the steps that the applicant is willing to take to promote the licensing objectives, can be found at Appendix A on page 11 of the report. So the application has attracted representation from the Communities and Environment team in their capacity as a responsible authority. A copy of the representation, including the grounds on which it is made, can be found on page 33 at Appendix C of the report. The licensing authority is also in receipt of a joint objection from Leeds West MP and all 3 Armley Ward councillors. A copy of this representation, alongside individual representations from 2 of those local ward councillors, can be found at Appendix D on page 37 of the report. And finally, the application has also attracted a total of 10 representations from local residents that express concerns relating to crime and antisocial behaviour issues. Copies of these representations are located at Appendix E of the report, and the licensing authority is also receiving instruction that Councillor McKenna, who is present today, is representing the views of local constituents. And that, Chair, is an outline of the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. So going on to the applicant, Mr. Semper, if you want to put forward your case, and we agreed on 20 minutes, but from what you said earlier, the first part will be a bit shorter with a bit more of a summary at the end. Following your first bit, of course, there'll be questions from members as well, which won't eat into your time. So, Mr. Semper.
Good morning again. Okay, now for the reasons given at the start of the hearing, I will introduce the application to you and preserve my minutes left so that I can answer any concerns raised further upstream. So before you is the application itself, it speaks for itself. We have also provided printouts of the last 6 months of crime and ASB data from the Home Office Crime Mapper site, which is compiled from the submissions of the West Yorkshire Police. And these show in our submission there is a low level of both crime and ASB around the premises site. We've also furnished 2 statements of truth, which contain hyperlinks to 2 videos of environmental visual audits of Armley Ridge Road and Armley Moor that we've compiled over the last couple of weekends. These video products simply demonstrate A, the low level of litter in the locale of the application, 2, what that litter represents, i.e. An absence of street drinkers at this locality, 3, the types of product that street drinkers on Armley Moor do favour, which we will not stock incidentally, and 4, the opinions of neighbouring businesses and local residents, albeit only one neighbour wants to provide his details and credentials. You get a lot of that. People get a bit nervous about it. Okay, we've also provided, we've also included a video tour of the new shop, introducing you to the applicant, Mr. Johnson, demonstrating that it is at the top end of the market regarding equipment, furnishings and feel. Consequently, we feel these documents and videos speak for themselves, and we will address specific issues raised during the representations in my summing up at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Semper. That was quicker than I expected, but take your point. Thank you. Are there any questions from members? First of all, for Mr. Semper.
Yes, please, Chair.
Go on.
Yes, it's slightly difficult to ask questions at this stage because of the briefness, the brevity of Mr. Semper's initial remarks. But presumably, just to get clear, the premises are already operating. Are they as retail premises?
No, sir, they haven't opened.
If I can just finish. And then, just to get clear, the applicant's motivation for the application is to increase his business profits. Is that right?
Well, I think yes, but I think every business is the object of the exercise is to make it as profitable as possible. So I mean, that's within the nature of it.
Thank you.
Councillor Marshall, any questions for Mr. Semper?
Not at this stage until I'm able to get further information when he speaks. So I'll hold on for now. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple. Thank you. So, Mr. Semper, you say there's not much litter, and you've outlined in your statement of truth how much you found. But how many discarded drinks bottles or cans would you say is enough to show a street drinking problem?
Well, one piece of discarded litter is a problem. What I'm after showing is that it's not a disproportionate problem, and what the local population are discarding, i.e. what kind of alcoholic products they're drinking and what kind of and where they're drinking it. That was the purpose of that submission, sir.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned there about what won't be stocked. Would you be willing for that as a condition? And then could you go over what you won't stock or what you're not intending to stock, and how that links to the street drinking problems of Armley?
That's a really good point. Clearly, we will do whatever this panel specifies, and if that is an upper limit on percentage ABV drinks that we offer in beer, cider or lagers, so be it. And if it is, if your recommendation is no single sales of individual cans, so be it.
You just froze mid-sentence there, Mr. Semper. You finished it. Just froze after individual cans. I'm not sure if you're back with us. No, it doesn't look like it.
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, that's fine. We could come back to Mr. Semper, just because it looks like it's still frozen, but please do give us a nod or a wave if you're unfrozen, and we'll tell you if we see you. And if you can still hear us, we'll leave at that, and give Mr. Semper a chance to either get back on the call or get. Oh, it's gone completely. Get back on the call. It seems only fair to pause a little. Rob, would you agree?
I was just going to say, yeah, because especially given he's saying he's going to focus on responding to the objectives, I think he needs to hear what they have to say.
Yes, please.
Give him a few minutes to get back in.
I'm just going to try and get in contact with Nick. See if I can get him connected again.
Okay.
Just bear with me 2 ticks. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your patience. While we're at, I've noticed we've got John McKimmins in just come into the call. We'll let you introduce yourself, John, once Mr. Semper is back in and everyone's in the room. But if we could just remind you to put your microphone on mute while we wait, that'd be fantastic. But welcome. We'll give a quick introduction in a few minutes, hopefully.
So I've just spoke to Nick. He is having problems with his internet connection, but he's trying to sort it out as quickly as possible. So I've just let him know that the meeting is being paused for the time being.
Well, thanks, Matthew.
No problem.
Welcome
back. Hear me, guys. I'm really sorry about that. I'm dialing in from mid Wales, and things can be a little bit ropey out here. So I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. Welcome back. We just had you mid-sentence about you just left off or froze to us or got off the call after you said about single cans.
My point being that whatever you want, sir, we're very mindful that you are in charge of licensing in Leeds, and if you want no single sales of cans, you can have them, sir. And if you want a limit on the percentage ABV of cans of beer, cider, and lager, again, we will do whatever you want. That's my point, sir.
Thank you, and I'm sure you mean us as a council rather than me personally, but thank you. There's no other questions for Mr. Semper from me. And Neil, Abigail, can I just check if you've thought of anything else?
Not at this stage, Chair.
That's fine, thank you. We've got one other introduction, just to make, and it's one of Peter Mudge's witnesses, John McKimmins, who's just got into the call. Do you mind introducing yourself, John, to everyone who's on the call, and for reminding you that we are being streamed, so people watching the stream as well, that's really useful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, my name is John McKimmins. I'm the team manager for the antisocial behaviour team covering West and North West Leeds.
Well, thank you. And we'll get to you once we get to the witness stage and the objectors. Okay, thank you. So we're on to that stage now for the objectors, as we've not got any further questions for the applicant or applicant's representative. Mr. Mudge, could I invite you to make your case up to 20 minutes, please? And then would the witnesses, Robin, just double checking this, be part of Mr. Mudge's time?
Yes, they would. They haven't put their own individual representations in, so they would be included in his allocation.
That's fine, thank you.
But
Just
not
wanted to
any
double check
questions
that.
that you might have to them if members had questions for the witnesses, and that wouldn't count as part of his time.
Of course, thank you. Peter, over to you and your two witnesses.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To reassure people, I think we'll certainly be able to fit within 20 minutes without any problems, because of course we have to. So I'll start with my comments. I've been working in helping the neighbourhood centres of Leeds. There's 66 of them. In this wide remit, there are only 2 where action plans have been drawn up to undertake piece-by-piece work with colleagues, the police, the LASBAT, public health. I won't go through the whole remit, but all the people who work in the area, and key to that as well, businesses, to help make the area a safer and more attractive area for shopping and for people to come to, and indeed economically better. As you probably guessed, Armley Town Centre is one of these 2 areas where special action plans have been needed. The action plans have been called for because across the city we're trying to we realise there's huge inequalities, and we're trying to raise the areas suffering most nearer to the other areas so the whole city benefits. And so that's what we're trying to do with Armley shopping area. The site in question adjoins one of the most problematic illegal drinking areas in Yorkshire, and if another off licenses or place selling alcohol is allowed to open, my fear is that this will exacerbate an already problematic drinking problem for the area, and ASB will rise into that area as it has already along the main street. The fact Armley has a cumulative impact policy, pardon me, sorry, I'll just go the whole screen my sheet. The fact Armley has a cumulative impact policy which ends at the moor, which is at most a couple of 100 yards from the site where the application is for, shows the tremendous problems of drink in the vicinity. It's not that there's no problems, no issues beyond that. That area of Armley is one of the worst in the region for the problem of drinking. Allowing application to go onto the border of this will surely only exacerbate the problem from the town centre into a residential area. However, it's not in the SIP area, but whilst it's just outside that, it's well within the PSPO area, which is Public Spaces Protection Orders area. And this includes the town centre and goes down to an area called Moorfield Road, which is only a little bit beyond where the application is for, but it does include that area. And a recent review confirmed of PSPO's across Leeds confirmed it should remain running along Moorfield Road, which keeps this supermarket plan within that area. The description of the latest review of PSPOs in Leeds notes, we only introduce PSPOs if ASB happens often and harms residents' quality of life. We've worked with partners, including the police and local councillors, to agree all of our proposals. So my understanding from that is that there is problems with alcohol in that area and it affects people's quality of life. I have no other proof of that, but I hope the LASBAT team, who will be speaking in a while, and also any information we have from the police will vouchsafe that. As this application is within a residential area, it will of course affect children and increasing contact issues arising from the nearby sale of alcohol, which should be detrimental to them. Personally, I've experienced, I'm sure many people have, problems with drunks and drugs at the top of that street. I do accept not quite down to where the shop is, but certainly on that road. And only the other day, I turned to drive down there, and there was 3 people standing in the road, one right in the centre, who obviously drugged off their heads. So there are problems in the area, and I think anything we can do to reduce that is to the good. I fear another off licence would draw the problems further down Ridge Road, and rather than helping us to resolve problems on Town Street, it could in fact exacerbate them. Finally, I'd like to say the site is opposite Interplay Theatre, which is a hub of research and development, creating sensory theatre and providing community events for residents of Leeds. It's a public area. It attracts a lot of youth using it, and many children from the local community rely on this for their social well-being. That's all I wanted to say on this, but if I may, I'd like to invite John McKimmings to speak next from the Antisocial Behaviour team, and then Jonathan Hindley from Public Health subsequently. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Yes. In terms of the antisocial behaviour team covering the west and northwest area of Leeds, Armley is one of the more problematic ward areas that we deal with, and there's a number of very different issues within the community, and I'm sure Mr. Hindley will explain things around sort of indices of deprivation and like poor mental and physical health, also prevalence of alcohol use and Class A drug use. In relation to the Town Street area, I actually formed part of the submission for the cumulative impact assessment, and it was very clear to me that a lot of the cases that we deal with in the Armley area are fueled by alcohol, which was part of the submission that I made for the cumulative impact. Quite a number of these issues have descended into violent crime, and obviously the wider area, which extends past Town Street to over Ridge Road, past Charlie Cake Park and on towards Little Scotland, there have been quite a few very high profile incidents of violent crime. There's been an attempted murder and unfortunately a murder in a very small space of time. We often get issues in the Town Street area in regards to street drinkers and things that come along with that, such as verbal abuse and also things like public urination and people being incapable in some way due to drink or drug consumption. Also, just off Town Street and just to the other side of Armley Moor that Peter referred to, there are some residential tower blocks, and adjacent to those is a small parade of shops on Gelder Road with some steps that go down into the car park of the tower blocks. We have had recent reports of like vagrancy within there, and someone's actually been confronted by a man in a sleeping bag brandishing a machete. So the situation in Armley at the moment is quite volatile. There's a number of different issues at play, and also there has been quite a lot of negative publicity, both in newspapers and on local social media, in relation to people who've gone to a local MP to say, you know, how they feel living in the Armley area, and the common factor is that they feel too intimidated at some points to use the shopping area. They're concerned about alcohol use and drugs and violent crime. So in terms of the Armley area at the moment, it seems very, very negative when all the partners are working very, very hard to try and enhance the positives, and as Peter said, you know, make it a desirable place to go and do your shopping and use the local facilities. There's also quite a lot of sort of support provision in that area. There was a medical centre, there's a sheltered housing scheme that all kind of face onto Town Street. So the aims of the partnership are to make Armley safe and desirable for people to go there and go about their business shopping using banks and chemists and doctors and that kind of stuff. So as I say, at the moment, Armley is an area of concern, and you know, along with Peter, you know, we looked at the cumulative impact for well, on a very sound evidential base from all the partnership in terms of the effect that alcohol has within antisocial behaviour and within the community. You know, going back to what I was saying about some of the issues in the Armley ward area around poor mental and physical health. And I think with Peter saying that, you know, it is very, this proposed premises is very, very close to the Town Street area and within the public space protection order area, which is currently in the process of being renewed. And as Peter says, the evidence base is there to still maintain prohibitions around being in possession of alcohol in a public place. So the concern would be that if there's another outlet just on the cusp of the sort of problematic area, it could even unwittingly contribute to that kind of scenario, which is making residents and people using the Town Street area uncomfortable. I think that's all I can say.
Okay, Chair, would you like me to go next? Is that right, Peter?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that harm to health for the individual is not a consideration, but what we're concerned about from public health is the wider determinants of health, strain on services, and the impact on our local youth. So we are concerned about granting these premises a licence, not only because of the cumulative effect of adding to yet another licensed premises in an area with high levels of antisocial behaviour, crime, and high admissions to accident and emergency services due primarily to alcohol-related harm, but because it provides another easy accessible source of cheap budget alcoholic beverages to a large resident alcohol dependent community. And we have got a large community of recovering drug addicted, alcohol dependent citizens in that area. We're concerned about the social environment impact of hardened drinkers moving from venue to venue, off license to off license in search of cheap alcoholic beverages or even just alcoholic beverages if they have been refused from another outlet. And we see that ourselves. Many of you would have been out and about on Army Town Street at night and early evening, and you can see crowds of inebriated drinkers moving from outlet to outlet to secure a drink. I'm concerned about the negative impact of this street neighbourhood environment where young men especially, but young women see crowds of young people, adults, street drinking. We know this environment strongly influences those from vulnerable or complex family backgrounds, and high levels of deprivation in the area, and the massive detrimental impact of the pandemic on services, where a lot of local residents and citizens across the city have turned to alcohol, put an extra strain on our services. And then my time before working as a council officer in the third sector, many of the young men I work with, when asked about their aspirations, was to drink lager and sit in front of the television. And we know that the environment, there's lots of robust peer-reviewed evidence to suggest that the environment has an impact on young people, especially the people we're trying to support from extremely complex and vulnerable backgrounds. The last point I wanted to make was strain on services. So I know health harms is not a licensing objective, but currently due to central funding cuts, our LCC commissioned local harm reduction and our clinical commissioning group are under a lot of strain, and unfortunately, because of the response to the pandemic, there are more cuts on the way. So the central funding cuts to alcohol and drug treatment services puts the service under considerable strain, compounded again by the pandemic. There is sufficient peer-reviewed evidence to explain how local residents with alcohol and substance abuse issues can be influenced by their immediate environment and easy access to alcohol. We know in Armley ward, when community members aren't being supported, drug dealing, antisocial behaviour and nuisance increases, as John's explained. Also has a massive impact on the mental and emotional health of local residents. And as John and Peter rightly point out, this is a ward that is under tremendous pressure. I just got a quick quote from somebody from the recovery community. So this is somebody that was addicted to alcohol, and he said, "When I was drinking, I felt included in the world of accessibility. It validated my appetite. Alcohol dependency has to be the ugliest and most harmful condition in our modern age, and yet we continue to feed it. We pamper it, we celebrate it," and it's a quote from an ex-drinker. "We are worried this extra resource for drinkers will put an increasing strain on our services when we know more cuts are on the way. Some of the Better Together outreach services have lost 60, 70, 80,000 pounds from their budget. And with the local boots closed and increased drug dealing around the pharmacies move, it will just be another issue for our local services, Forward Leeds, and our harm reduction services to contend with." That's it, Chair.
Thank you, all three of you there. Thank you. Are there any questions from Councillor Marshall or Councillor Buckley, first of all, for either Peter, John, or John?
Yeah, thank you very much all for all your contributions. I do understand from Mr. Semper that any business would like to obviously add more value and more business to their business, and that's why they're wanting to go into the sales of alcohol. I am actually more concerned about the prevalence of alcohol and drug use in the Armley area and the environmental impact on young people. Have you got any statistics for us, Mr. Hindley, in terms of the prevalence of alcohol and drug use in that area?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, out of the areas, and I'm talking about Hare Hills and Chapeltown, areas of Little London, it has one of the largest numbers of drug-dependent users. And obviously now there's a 21% increase directly due, we think, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, people losing their jobs and turning to alcohol and drugs as a form of release. So it is putting a lot of our services under strain. Obviously, as you know, it's been well documented, Leeds City Council is under financial pressure because of the emergency hubs. So when the decision comes to recommission some of these services, it's likely that there will be cuts. We're expecting, but we don't know yet, because obviously Leeds has got a high level of infection rates. We're expecting the kind of increase on services in these deprived wards, these 10% most deprived wards, of which Armley is one, to increase by another 10%. So we are concerned. We won't know until the end of the year, and when we can see infection rates and when we can see what the employment market's like, and we can have a look at the indices of multiple deprivation for the Armley ward. But we are expecting an increased usage. And also, it took us a long time to get Forward Leeds into Armley because of resident complaints, obviously because they thought it would attract more antisocial behaviour. So we are concerned that it will just negate any of the work they do. We wanted to prove to local residents that it was a valuable service and it would help and support our most vulnerable residents in this ward and surrounding areas, because obviously the problem doesn't stay put. These hardened drinkers move around. So we feel this would negate their best efforts, because we don't have sufficient funds to have a complete complement of outreach workers. So these are community development workers, community health workers that would go out and talk to these citizens that have alcohol dependency issues.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Buckley, anything?
Yes, please, Chair. Just a couple of questions for John, if I can. I'd just like to thank the contributors so far for being so clear in all the comments that they've made. And just for their information, although the ward I represent is across the other side of the city, I am actually quite familiar with this area from a previous period of my life. And so I do know a little bit about the area. And I just wanted to develop this theme that John touched on, in that we sometimes talk about the cumulative impact policy areas. And of course, this application falls just outside. But I just wanted him to confirm or comment on my thought that even if it's outside a CIP area, literally the cumulative impact still applies. And secondly, on a similar point, that, and I think John touched on this, that even if an individual application had merits, hypothetically, that nevertheless, the granting of further and further licenses does actually make the area look as if it's particularly appealing to this kind of street drinking and all that kind of thing. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like me to respond, Chair?
Either of the Johns. I noticed Neil said John there,
Yeah.
so anyone who can.
Councillor, which one would you like to respond?
John Hindley first, and then John McKimmins. Let's. I'm sure you both have comments.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Yes, Councillor, I can confirm that. Before I worked for the council, I did 15 years in the third sector, and I know to engage in a hardened drink, it can take 12 to 18 months to make any breakthrough. I think that the movement of drinkers, they move out. They don't kind of stay in designated areas for cumulative impact, and this is all about the wider determinants of health. So even though you have an area of special interest where the local authorities and third sector organisations and charities and harm reduction services are worried about, drinkers will move out of these and will drink and purchase alcohol on the peripheries of all of these areas. We know this is true from Chapeltown and Hare Hills, making it difficult for them to be tracked and to help. And I suppose the other comment about this is that it does make it a magnet for affordable alcohol. So a concentration of just as a concentration of takeaways can have an impact on that ward's health. A concentration of outlets that sell alcohol or cheap alcohol or any alcohol at all will definitely be a magnet. And we have had anecdotal tales of people travelling from the city or homeless people, as John's mentioned, moved from city when they've been moved on, going down to Armley because there is affordable alcohol. So yes, Councillor, in my professional judgment, I'd say you're correct. These issues do seep out into the area, the peripheries of these designated areas. It certainly is my time working for Health and Living Network Leeds and Barker. I would say this is true.
Thank you, Jonathan. From my perspective, I mean, also I've got quite a lot of affinity with the Armley area. I was born and brought up and used to go to Christchurch School, so I know the area very, very well, and the proximity of everything and how things have changed over time. John does make a valid point about the transference of people from other areas. There's been quite a lot of high publicised work done in the city centre around engagement and enforcement for alcohol and drug issues, rough sleeping, those kind of things. People tend to gravitate then to take a line of least resistance, if that makes sense. So the Armley area is actually quite a desirable area for people who have that street life, because you know, if people are begging for money, for example, you've got a stream of people that you can ask for money. There's shops sometimes that, you know, like for example, there's a Greg's, there might be some spare food, or someone might buy an extra pasty, those kind of things. So it does at points in the Armley area, as you as you sort of go around the area, say from Tong Road all the way up through Town Street and beyond, that there is a prevalence of places where you can buy alcohol. And then, you know, you look at Town Street as an example, and, you know, you will see people who are sprawled out on the floor, sprawled out on benches, in shop doorways and things like that. So, you know, it does all contribute to that feeling that Armley isn't a safe place. And I think in terms of the point you make in terms of a cumulative impact policy, I think that you are right. I mean, boundaries have to be somewhere, and obviously when you look at the main focus of that, it was around the sort of Town Street and the sort of surrounding streets up towards St Bartholomew's and down towards Moorfield. So, you know, I think that you are correct that having another outlet around and about that area will probably have a sort of, it will add to the cumulative impacts, even though it's not in that specific area. And one of the other things that I did mention before is actually the council housing stock in that area does house quite a lot of vulnerable people, and I've noticed that, you know, there is the sheltered housing complex, but high-rise accommodation in Leeds as an example, because there's four tower blocks in close proximity to the area. Generally speaking, you know, people who apply for and get under the choice-based letting scheme one-bed multi-storey flats, they sometimes have been resettled street users, for example. So in the Westerleys area, I know of a number of flats where, you know, because people have been in high need and the property is available, they get housed in there, and that also then attracts their cohort of friends. But also, you know, just thinking on about the sort of harm reduction side of things, and, you know, John saying how hard it is to engage with a hardened alcohol dependent person. If you've got those kind of issues that you're struggling with, you're almost tripping over alcohol outlets as you come out of your house, as you go to the shop, as you go around to see your friends and things like that. So, you know, it is a real concern. But yeah, I do think that, you know, more alcohol outlets in the Armley Ward area isn't going to help the situation at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on that, Councillor Buckley?
Not at the moment, Chair. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Both covered a couple of questions I had, so thanks for the responses there as well. For any of the Johns or Peter, really, in the statement of truth from Mr. Semper, it says about going to the area directly around, or, you know, in the vicinity of the applicant's premises, and seeing a few cans on the ground, not being indicative of street drinking. But could you tell us when and where? So what streets exactly, and as well as Town Street, or if it's just Town Street, times of days, certain days, street drinking is a problem in Armley?
Well, I can kick this off, Mr. Chair, if that's all right. The problem with street drinking in Armley, I venture to say, as the third biggest city, we've come down amongst the hardest in the whole of the UK on. We've had extra police on board. We've had LASBAT working hard on it. We've had many people. We've also got the community together. And we have managed, I feel, others may disagree, but I think we have managed to reduce the amount of street drinking on Town Street and on Branch Road. After COVID, it was terrifying. There were people walking everywhere with open cans. So the police introduced zero tolerance. So they'd take the alcohol off anybody they saw drinking and put it down the drain in front of them and explain to them they weren't allowed to be drinking there because it was zero tolerance. So it's been an iron fist approach on Town Street and Branch Road. The the drinking's throughout the day. It is less now during daytime, but in the evenings it's bad. There's still violent situations flare up, which I'm sure Councillor McKenna will probably better be able to tell you about in a minute. But and I don't dispute what was said about the good state of Army Ridge Road. There's a hell of a lot of work going on in these areas to improve these areas. But my concern is that it will just take the problem down that road. And it will just take I mean, all right, the problem maybe doesn't go down that road at the minute, but if you start selling the alcohol cans there, then it will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Oh, no, then one more question. And again, Peter, you may be able to answer this. Are there any particular drinks that causes this problem in Armley? Is it different from elsewhere? Are there particular drinks in Armley, or is it pretty much standard either across the problem areas in Leeds or across the country? And what types of drinks are problematic?
Thank you. I wouldn't single it out. People automatically move towards calling it the super strength stuff, but yes, certainly that is the worst one. But I'm sure if they weren't on super strength, they'd be on something else. I could well be wrong here, but I have done some research on super strength stuff, and the only place where I think it had limited any success at all in reductions was Ipswich, which is the place where it's heralded because they put a huge amount of work in there. But even in Ipswich, they said only had limited success. And I don't feel that singling out any particular type of alcohol would do it. I think the problem is that the people will, they are drunks. I'm sorry to say it, but they are drunks, a lot of these people, and they will get drunk on whatever they have available to them. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Unless are there any other questions for Peter or the two Johns from members?
I was just going to ask Council if I could just come in, because you were talking about the areas where this kind of thing happens with street drinking and the ASB related to it. There has been a bit of a displacement from Town Street. Town Street is still a big focus because, as I say, you've got alcohol outlets, you've got betting shops, you've got an amusement arcade, you've got a Greggs, there's all kinds of things there that attract people down there. We do get issues in the sort of streets around Town Street in terms of, as I mentioned before, Gelder Road, the Burnsall tower blocks that are on Thika Lane, Armley Moor, to a lesser extent because it's more open. Also, as you go up the back of the Armley one stop towards sort of Hall Lane area, we get issues of street drinking and vagrancy around there. One of the other kind of things that we do get, which isn't necessarily street drinking related, but it's in the area of Little Scotland, around the Aberdeens, around the Paisleys, where people don't have gardens. And it's quite common that we do get quite a few complaints of people being rowdy and drunk on street, where they've been sat on the doorstep having a few tins amongst friends or amongst family members, and then start arguing and carrying on with each other in the street. So, what I would say is there is a concentration in the Town Street area and those immediate streets around it, but the issues relating to alcohol consumption and ASB do branch kind of further out towards Wingate and towards Little Scotland as well. And it can be any time of day. I mean, that kind of scenario happens mainly on an evening, but the street drinking around the sort of Town Street stretch, if you like, it can be at any point of the day from early morning till very late at night. And I think that where we've got these tower blocks in almost a town centre type environment, having dealt with vagrancy issues for the best part of 18-20 years, as the weather turns, people look for shelter, and tower blocks in Leeds are particularly vulnerable to that kind of thing. and Armley is easily accessible from a lot of places in Leeds, and there's almost an environment where you can get your drink, you can probably beg for money, and you can get your head down in a tower block, all within a very small, tightly packed area. So that's my observations, Chair.
Okay, thanks, John. Really useful answer to my earlier question. Thank you. Unless there's anything else, we'll move on to Councillor McKenna. You have up to 20 minutes, and then questions on top of that if members have questions for you. But are you okay to go, Jim?
I am, Chair. Thank you very much. I don't think I'll need anything like 20 minutes. I think it's been adequately covered by Peter, Jonathan and John, and I'm sure you've got a flavour of the problems that infest Army at the moment. I'd just like to say to the applicant straight off, if this was simply a convenience store, I might even welcome it. So, but a convenience store that proposes to sell alcohol from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. in an area where we have a profusion of alcohol. The problem we believe as local council is that the more alcoholic outlets come into Army, the actually cheaper of the unit cost of alcohol. It drives the price down. And sometimes it's used by the people in the convenience stores to get people through their doors and perhaps buy groceries at the same time. So therefore, per se, we do object. We've been fighting street drinking in Army for about 8 years now. It really is a serious problem. There was a question from you, Chair. How does Army differ from some of the other areas like Harold's? I think it was something on those lines. Well, Army is unique in some ways because we have Her Majesty's Prison, Army Jail there, and a lot of the inmates there are on short sentences, and a lot of them have mental health problems. And when they're released, they often don't go back where they come from, Huddersfield, Bradford, Halifax, you name it. They settle in Armley. And in this area of Armley, around Armley Ridge Road, there is lots of private rent and housing, landlords and what have you. And they take up these flats because they're cheap. It's cheaper in Armley than much other places. And we also, they obviously bring all the problems with them. And a lot of it is certainly drinking and drugs. So in no way at all would this help the situation for us. Just to remind that all 3 Armley councillors have objected, and our local MP, Rachel Reeves, has also objected. I've had 2 objections from local people who don't wish their names to be given out publicly, but their comments, I think, is worth me saying. One of them says, I was wondering if you can help with the above. While a convenience shop would be welcome, I feel the sale of alcohol would not help the area, especially as the proposed opening hours are 6 to 11. And also this would be right opposite a new autism home. I want to object, but I don't want my home address open to the public. It's a good point that we have just opened a home for autism right across the road from it. We've also, of course, got Christchurch Junior School who walk past this place, and then we see hangers on. It's just an awful vision for them to see. And then again, we have Dixon Academy, and a lot of children from young people from that school will walk home this way. So congregation, which we've already seen in Town Street, associated with alcohol sales, is not a good role model for these young people. Regarding crime, and I have read the applicant's statement of truth, but I would remind that just very recently, and you probably all saw it, I think it was on national news, there was a carjacking where a young woman was forced from a car, and her car was driven away with 2 young children in the back seat. So it's not by any stretch of the imagination crime-free. The car was later found, I believe, in Rothwell, burned out. That is a matter of weeks ago. Regarding evidence of alcohol on the streets, I can tell you that I've taken part in a community cleanup around the moor, and Councillor Cunningham and Smart have done one around this area, and we have cleared the debris and remnants of alcohol sale. There is also three shops selling alcohol in this small area, and really we just don't need it. We don't need it. Armley is becoming the alcohol off-license sales capital of Leeds, and the local people are really tired of it. We need some respite from this. We don't need alcohol same. We've far too many. In fact, I'd like to see some of them closed. I mean, for instance, the one on Armley Town Street, which is 24/7. Going back to the opening hours, and this is almost 24/7. It's going to proposing to sell alcohol from 6 a.m. in the morning till 11 at night. That leaves 7 hours each day without alcoholic sales. It's not needed. It's not welcome. Bring your convenience shop in by all means. I'm sure it'll be welcomed and people will use it. But you don't need alcohol sales to bring people into the shop. You'll just drive the prices down more, and there'll be no return on alcohol. It'll be driven down so low anyway. So with that, Chair, I think I've said all I need to say on behalf of myself and my councillors, and I thank John and Jonathan and Peter for making such a strong case, which has saved me from doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from Councillor Marshall or Councillor Buckley?
No, just to say thank you for that emotional presentation, Councillor McKenna. Thank you.
Neil, anything from you for Jim?
Yes, Chair. Just a brief question for Councillor McKenna, and again thank him for his contribution. But I just wanted to very briefly ask him about the home for autism sufferers, because it just strikes me that in my experience, this has been something which has been historically an underfunded condition and an underfunded part of councils and so on. And am I right in thinking that those who have autism or are on the autistic spectrum particularly need a stable environment and also a tranquil one? That was my understanding, and if he could just confirm that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, Councillor Buckley, I certainly can. I have got a 6-year-old grandson, Finn Poyser, who has severe autism, and we do a lot of babysitting with Finn. He's a lovely kid, and we're desperately trying to keep him in mainstream school. We had a look at a silk, and we didn't like it, and they didn't like it, and we didn't feel that he was going to get the stability that you talk about. So he still goes to a local primary school. He's totally fascinated with Thomas. Everything about him is Thomas. But he's an intelligent boy, but he's incontinent now at 6, and he does speak, but he usually doesn't join sentences up. But he certainly needs everything stable in his life. Last week, the teacher refused to give him his milk. He still drinks milk, and sometimes he has it from a bottle. And he just had a meltdown, and it happens all the time. Anything that changes his routine affects him badly. And as I say, I can certainly answer that question from personal experience. And thank you, Councillor Buckley, for asking me that.
Thank you, and thank you, Jim. I have some experience of that in the family as well, although a bit older at 25, and experience of, you know, the allures of drinking as well for it sounds like slightly less autistic tendencies, but yeah, certainly experiencing that myself as well. So thank you, and thanks, Neil, for that question. I don't think, in fact, I was going to ask about you mentioned it a little bit, Jim, the discarded drinks bottles and cans, and your ward colleagues and yourself going out and litter picking quite regularly. You may have read the statement by Mr. Semper saying he's found a couple on his visit on a weekend, a couple of cans here and there. Is that indicative of what you find and maybe the Cleaner Neighbourhoods team find as well in your experience, or is that quite a bit less than what's usual? Do you want to comment on what was found in that statement by Mr. Semper?
Well, Mr. Semper obviously comments are factual. I don't dispute them, but it's hard to know where they come from. I've seen cars open their window and chuck them out the window. I'm sure we all have sat around here. It's often hard to know where they come from. And of course, depending on where you buy a drink, you don't necessarily drop it, particularly as a civil can. You'll walk towards your home and then discard it, you know. So it's hard to make too much of a judgment from litter from drinking, street drinking.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from Councillors Buckley or Marshall? Thank you. We'll go back to then the applicant, Mr. Semper. You have the remainder of your time just to say anything, and especially in response to the objectors and any of the questions and answers thereof. I'll hand it to you, Mr. Semper.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm grateful for the cited representations, and we listened very carefully. Now, in the opinion of the representatives, the application is dismissed out of hand, and I understand their position. I always do. However, I will explain why I respectfully beg to differ. Now, as members of the licensing subcommittee, you'll be aware that objections can only be made on the grounds that the application does not promote the licensing objectives. So the first point is this: responsible authorities have a statutory responsibility to promote the licensing objectives. For example, the police are the lead agency for the prevention of crime objective and have all the facts, figures and experience needed to come here and argue vehemently against this, or indeed any application that does not support the licensing objectives. But they're not here, and I submit there's a very good reason for that. The police have made their observations known regarding the application as submitted in its original form. All their recommendations, all the police recommendations have been taken on board, and their suggested conditions have been adopted. Therefore, they have not objected because this application does indeed support the licensing objectives, and there is no good and valid reason to object to it in law or fact. Likewise, with the exception of the Communities Environment team, no other responsible authority has objected, as I'm aware. If there was anything to object to, they are statutorily and duty bound to be here and object to it. I believe you can read a very great deal into their absence here today. So we're left with the representations, which is a euphemism for objections, as you correctly identified, from these good members. And they're basically around 5 issues, namely the proximity to the Armley CIP area, the no economic need for another licensed premises, 3, crime and ASB and aggressive begging, 4, street drinking, and 5, traffic and parking. That's referred to in some of the residents' reps. Now, we completely accept that Armley does have problems with cumulative impact, hence the imposition of the cumulative impact policy. Included in that policy is the defined area in Armley to which that policy applies. These premises are outside that area to some distance. Now, without being funny, it's a bit like being pregnant. You can't be nearly pregnant or nearby to being pregnant. You either are or you're not. These premises are either within the CIP area or they aren't, and they aren't. Okay, now if the local councillors would like the CIA to be extended to cover this location, the correct course of action is to follow the prescribed route to extend it as prescribed in the statutory legislation. Okay, but in the meantime, that policy and all the restrictions and rebuttable presumptions contained therein do not apply to this application in my submission. The second thing is this. David Dodson, he's on the screen in front of you, the applicant, and I totally get the nervousness of what the nervousness of the representatives is all about. He has no intention of adding to any pre-existing problems that occur quite some distance down the road. If I can introduce David to you, please. He's a financial supervisor with the Yorkshire Post, who has made a significant personal financial investment in this, his new business venture. This is a competent professional businessman sitting before you at the time when businesses are struggling and or closing all over the UK and no doubt in Leeds. This young man actually wants to start one catering for a more discerning market and to run it with the degree of social responsibility that you and the Armley community so rightly deserve too. He's done a lot of charitable work, like most of us here actually, but his particular area has been around mind and knows better than most the damage done by irresponsible retailing to vulnerable people who self-medicate using inappropriate alcohol consumption. This is just not him. Okay, let's talk about the premises. You've seen the video, he showed you around it. This is not a what I call a booze busters operation, sorry, a booze brothers operation, intent on knocking out high volumes of low cost but high percentage ABV products to street drinkers or children or indeed anyone. This is a well-equipped and furnished premises, not a stack 'em high, flog it cheap outfit. You will have seen the video and it's got the feel of a Sainsbury's local. Problem drinkers would detract from David's business model. With as much humanity as possible, they are just not welcome in his new shop. He doesn't want their money. He doesn't want their custom or their patronage, and he doesn't want them hanging around his shop either. Put simply, we categorically refuse to feed the habits of vulnerable people, as one councillor puts it in the representations. This is a high-end, desirable shop. Now, there are currently 16, yes, indeed 16 CCTV cameras covering the shop, with particular attention to both angles of the sale transaction, both the vendor and the purchaser. So you see who's selling it to whom. Okay, the system has already been used. We had reference to this carjacking. The police have actually adduced the evidence of the carjacking from the system that David has put in. I was thinking, we had a conversation with your licensing department about actually showing you the video that David's provided that actually detected that offence. But on legal, because it's sub judice, on legal grounds, we decided against it. But like members of your own licensing team have actually seen that. Now, we have conducted environmental visual audits of street drinking and ASB on the Saturday morning. Now, this captures what happens on a Friday night, okay? And we video recorded the rubbish left lying around in the area. It's all on video, and I hope you've all had the opportunity to watch. Now, we've proved what they drink and where they drink it by showing you the discarded products that street drinkers leave behind on Armley Moor. That's where we found by far the vast majority of discarded alcohol products. We simply will not stock the products that street drinkers crave, i.e. high ABV, low price ciders and lagers. And furthermore, we offer not to sell it in single cans either, which is the way that they purchase their street alcohol. Now, you've heard a lot about the no need for another. I totally understand that, but actually no need for yet another, as described in many representations, is specifically outside the remit of the licensing legislation. I point you to para 14.19 of the statutory guidance, which says clearly that needs concerns commercial demand for another and is a matter for the planning authority and the market. This is not a matter for a licensing authority in discharging its licensing functions or for its statement of licensing policy. Therefore, and with the greatest respect, the no need for another economic argument is therefore irrelevant in law. Next, crime and ASB. I'll now address you on your localised crime patterns. You'll find in the bundle, I produced printouts, the official stats from the Home Office UK Crime Mapper site, and it's based on the data produced by the West Yorkshire Police themselves. Okay, luckily the mapper gazetteers, that means focuses in, it puts a node of data very near to the premises, and you can see the number and types of crimes and ASB broken down in Armley Ridge Road for each of the past 6 months that are available. The figures are remarkably low for this location. There were 2 ASB incidents at the end of Armley Ridge Road where it meets Town Street in July. That's it for 6 months. As concerns crime, again, it rumbles on at about 3 per calendar month in a locality, which equates to less than 1 crime a week. Until we get to August, where there was a definite crime recording spike at 11 to include 4 violence and sexual offences, 3 damages and 2 burglaries in the surrounding streets, not in the immediate locality of this shop. But taken all together, that is 3.6 crimes per month. That's less than 1 a week. This is a remarkably low crime level for a city location, in all fairness. But this is not the matter of me, a former local policing lead for a city elsewhere in the Midlands. It is simply a matter of counting the figures and looking at those maps. Okay, now, by the way, very quickly on street drinking. The House of Commons briefing paper 5117 reminds us that drinking in the street or in a public place is not an offence. It's not even an offence to drink in a controlled drinking area. It's only an offence to refuse a request from an author to cease drinking or surrender your alcohol to an authorised person. I mentioned this as there have been constant references in the representations to illegal street drinkers. I sort of know what they mean, but believe we would all benefit from clarity as to what the actual UK law is. To be clear, street drinking per se is not a crime, and therefore is outside the crime and disorder licensing objective. Okay, now on traffic and parking, it hasn't come up this morning, so I'll be super quick on this. I understand what's been said, and these are not the remit of a licensing process, but sit with the planning, within the planning orbit. The videos provided also showed there are no issues with traffic and planning at the locality. Okay, so let's break down how likely the real and tangible rise of crime and ASB would be were you to grant this license. I submit that these premises operating under and committed to a set of model licensing conditions that are acceptable to yourself and in their current format are acceptable to the police would not undermine the licensing objectives or the local licensing policy. I must next point out para 2.21, and I know I'm largely talking to illegal people here, of the statutory guidance, word for word. It says beyond the immediate area surrounding the premises, these are matters for the personal responsibilities of individuals under law. I mentioned this in Leeds 2 weeks ago, raised a lot of eyebrows. This is not something I've made up, folks. This is what the law of our land says. An individual who engages in antisocial behaviour is accountable in their own right. Okay, I'm therefore not convinced that ASB perpetrated a 10-minute walk up the road from these premises, which to date have sold 0 alcoholic products anyway, can be attributed to these premises, either in fact, law, or with the benefit of a crystal ball as to what may or may not happen at some undisclosed time in the future. Now, the representative's position is that were you to grant this application, and the situation will become worse. You're going to drag people out of Almley town and drag them the 10-minute walk up to the up to Almley Ridge Road. Now, I again say that selling alcohol responsibly as part of our offering at a predominantly top-end convenience store setting with no more than 10% of the floor space given over to alcohol stock will not cause a new localised spike in alcoholism or conjure up many more so far unidentified antisocial or criminal street drinkers who will suddenly flood into the area. They will. Why would they come and flood the area? We are not stocking what they want. We are not selling it in the way that they buy it. Now, look, the representatives have no evidence that there's going to be this migration. Okay, it's their opinion based on speculation. You will, of course, and it's valued, but you must remember, and you'll be reminded by your legal advisor that speculation is excluded from your considerations in the dictum of the famous licensing case, the Thwaites case. Okay, I must also remind you that you've not heard or read one piece of evidence that speaks against this particular applicant or these premises. The other neighbouring businesses operators who appear on the video have no objection to this application. Some feature, like I say, some feature on the video that we provided, others declined to. The contributors report no issues with the application or the area and identify Armley Town Centre as the epicentre of the localised problems, describing it as a 10-minute walk from the premises. So in conclusion, we will accept whatever modified conditions, we accept the modified conditions proposed by the police because they are the lead agency on crime and disorder. And we've accepted them in their entirety, but we've offered a raft of conditions on the premises licence that will promote the licensing objectives. But clearly, Councillor Garner, will accept any further that you deem fit. Consequently, and respectfully, I exhort you to grant the application. So look, just very, very quickly, whiz through some of the highlights of what's been said. We've mentioned the PSPO, okay, the Public Spaces Protection Order. The police are the guardians of that, and they do not object to this application. We've mentioned the intercity intercity place across the way, the arts centre. He's not on the video, but we've actually spoken to one of the managers there, and he says that he has no objections with the application. Okay, in fact, we'll probably frequent our premises. We've had constant references to illegal drinking, street drinking. There's no such thing. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. There'll be a strain on services. That again is cumulative impact. Okay. We've heard people talking about easy access to cheap alcohol. We will not sell cheap alcohol, and we certainly will not give easy access to it. That is not our business plan. Also, we will not feed it, pamper it, or resource it, as one of the representatives mentioned. Now, the hours have come up, 6 a.m. till 11 a.m. Councillor Garner and your committee, if you want to trim those hours, feel free. That was the original application that went in, but we are here to fine-tune, hone what you want in Armley Ridge Road. So if you want 8 in the morning till 10 at night or whatever, that's within your gift, that's within your remit, so you just specify. Again, it's come up a lot, cheap units, cheaper, more alcohol. If we offer alcohol, it will drive the unit cost of alcohol down. It won't, because we won't be selling that stuff. We will not be competing in that market. Opposite the autism home, very good point. I've actually been to the autism home. I've spoken to a member of staff who declined to be on the video. They have no objection. I've been through their garden. There's no rubbish there. I've spoken to them. I was going to speak to the manager. I had an appointment to speak with a manager. However, they had an outbreak of COVID in there, and they decided it wasn't a good idea for me to go in there and interview them for the purposes of that video, and that's a fair one. Okay, let's have a look. We've mentioned the crime and the carjacking. We've mentioned the community clear-ups. That's why I do the environmental visual audits on a Saturday morning, because Friday night is drinking night, and on a Saturday morning, that's when you get your best evidence if you get out there and see what they discarded the night before. And lastly, if you are concerned about anything that Mr. Dodson intends to sell, please put a condition on it that we mark all our cans. We've got no problems in that, because you will not find our products in the hands of the street drinking population. We don't stock them, and we don't want to sell it to them. We don't, with the greatest respect, they're not welcome. We don't want them hanging around our shop in case they, their custom, it comes at £1 at a time for a 75 pence a can of 7.5% ABV cider. Okay, we don't want that money, and we certainly don't want them sitting around or frequenting the area around our shop, because that is really, really bad for business. With the greatest respect, they're not welcome. Now, that's a whistle-stop tour. If you've got any questions about what conditions, additional conditions you'd like, please chuck them in, and no doubt we'll probably accept them, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Semper, quite comprehensive there. Now, you mentioned about other questions, and the usual way of working for the remote sessions that we're now having to have is moving to private session. But then if there are any other questions for the applicant, we come back into the room. I propose we do that at this point, rather than take some questions now, just because of the way you've sort of backloaded your comments. And Councillors Buckley and Marshall Catton, are you in agreement with that if we adjourn now and then ask any other questions as the time comes? So we'll now move into private session to deliberate on the application. Could I ask that all parties, including the applicant and representative and the licensing officer, remain available, so remain on the call should we have, as a subcommittee, any additional questions? So that was the point I was trying to make there. If there's additional questions, you'll be invited back into the meeting by the clerk. Andy, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The subcommittee and the legal officer and clerk will now move to a breakout room for private discussion. We will return to the meeting once those discussions are concluded, and if I can just ask people to remain on the call, and you will be called back in. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for your patience. We'll just wait for everyone to come back in from the breakout rooms into this main session, so please bear with us. And we're just waiting for Councillor Marshall Katong and Peter Mudge to come back into the main session. So bear with us. I know some people have been having issues in and out of breakout rooms on Zoom, but we will make a start once the two of them are back in the room with us. Thank you. having trouble getting hold, Andy's just let me know, of Peter. I know we have the two Johns in, and Councillor McKenna, of course, as objectors. Rather than waiting, are we okay to? We did have a couple more questions for the applicant. Would it be okay to, and Rob, I'm looking in your direction more than anyone, to press on in the absence of any response and from Peter Mudge, and Peter Mudge being in the call?
Yeah, I think if you had questions for Peter Mudge, then obviously it would be an issue. But I'm not sure about putting the questions to his witnesses. But if you don't have questions for Peter Mudge, he wouldn't be able to be commenting on somebody else's answers anyway.
That's fine. Brilliant. So thank you everyone for your patience. We have had some robust discussion. There's just a question or two for the applicant. I'll just pass over to Councillor Marshall Katong, who has those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Semper, I've got two questions for you. The first question is on the crime rate that you quoted when you were speaking. I would like to ask that, have you also got the crime rate before the 6 months that you have just quoted? Because I am aware that obviously the last 6 months has been a very difficult time for the whole country, and we have been in a pandemic. So do you have stats for 2018 and 19, then we can have a good comparative analysis in terms of the statistics for the area that you've quoted? That's the first question. Second question is, you did mention that street drinking is not a crime and it's not illegal, which I do agree. But I would also like to ask that, do you also understand that street drinking could also lead to public nuisance? And I would like to know your comments on that. Thank you.
Right. Okay, first one is, no, I haven't got the 6 months prior to that. However, it is freely available on the UK Crime Mapper site. And if you'd like to adjourn for half an hour, I will lift it and I will send it to you. Okay. I'd remind you that you said it's just, the last 6 months have been overtaken by COVID, but you've already taken evidence from other representatives here today that COVID has caused an exponential growth in some parts of the city, namely Hare Hills, Chapel Town and Little London, according to my notes. So, it's caused an exponential growth elsewhere in the city. So there's no reason to believe it wouldn't in Armley Town Centre, or indeed Armley Ridge Road, if that were to be a problem, and it hasn't. Okay, but that is available. That's a freely available resource provided by the government based on West Yorkshire Police figures. Second question is, street drinking is not illegal. Yes, you're absolutely right. Is it public nuisance? Now, public nuisance is defined by the Act, and I'm going to throw myself at the feet of your legal services here. But public nuisance includes things like litter, noise, light, verminous infestation, and something else. It does not include ASB in the area in its definition. Now that's within the statutory guidance. And like I say, I'm just going from, I train this stuff. It's not a question I've been asked before, because clearly illegal street drinking, of which there's no such thing, but those behaviours are around crime and disorder, the crime and disorder, the behaviours that come with street drinking, the crime that comes with it would clearly fit within that licensing objective. I do not believe it falls within the public nuisance definition, ma'am. But again, I will be guided by your legal advisor.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding the crime rate, if you didn't have it, I will definitely be able to get it myself. So it's not a problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I think in the absence of further questions, we'll take another adjournment, but that'll be without the need for the applicant and the objectors. So thank you everyone for your attendance. That concludes the formal business of the public part of the committee today, and you'll be informed of the subcommittee's decision within 5 working days. But thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you for your patience as well, both with the adjournment there and a bit with the technology as well today. So thank you everyone, and nice to see you all, and have a good rest of the